So I'm going to say some stuff about bikes. Yay! Because this is what a bicycle advocate looks like, right? Okay, I'm going to start this. So yesterday, actually, I returned home from an insane family visit to Central Florida, where we drove across the state and most of the world looked like this. If you've lived in the US for any stretch of time, this is a familiar view. I spent more time in cars in 4 days than a month of living in Portland. In urban settings, when I'm surrounded by cars, I think about how much space they're claiming and how much time we spend in places that look like that big freeway or this street, and comparatively, how little of that space is occupied or utilized by bikes. Our streets have been designed and planned primarily with vehicles in mind. It's easy to think this isn't the case when you're living in Portland, Oregon, but a national survey found that bike lanes were available for less than 5% of bike trips. That's 95% of bike trips made on streets designed mainly for cars. So, in most cases, cyclists are vulnerable road users. Our streets can be dangerous and sometimes fatal. But a 2012 study found that streets with protected bike lanes saw 90% fewer injuries per mile than streets without any bike infrastructure. But it isn't all about infrastructure and street planning, it's about people. Bikes and cars have always had a kind of challenging relationship. It's easy to fall into a kind of us against them mentality, and part of the problem is stereotypes on both sides. I think we've all been part of that. So not all cyclists are angry red light running bike jocks like that guy, and not all drivers are pissed off Confederate flag toting truck drivers who want to kill us. The question is, who does the road belong to? The answer is people getting somewhere. Urban cyclists are families, students, commuters, office workers, shoppers spending money, people getting where they need to go. The more people move into cities that we love, like Portland, the more we are going to want to reduce traffic. And the only way to do this is to move away from the ideas that cars own the road and bikes are pesky and in the way. Of course, not all cyclists are perfect. We are often guilty of riding above the laws and behaving erratically. It is one thing to be a bicycle advocate, but it's also important to be an advocate of responsible cycling, like these people that are doing things. So we gotta prove that we belong on the city streets. I also like to think beyond the spandex. The stereotype of cycling being only for sport is changing too, as are the demographics. But still, in the US, only about a quarter of all bicycle trips are made by women. It is slowly increasing, and I hope that part of this is the changing style of urban riding. Like that girl. Another thing we don't hear or see a lot is diversity in cycling. If more investment is made and more people ride, perhaps we can continue to diversify riding demographics. Between 2001 and 2009, cycling rates rose fastest among African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans. And increasing mobility options can increase options for people with less access to cars. Cycles on the road are part of the economic fabric of the city. Bikes are capable of moving not just people, but services and goods efficiently into the dense urban core. This reduces congestion for drivers and reduces CO2 emissions. This is what we work for at Portland Pedal Power. So the capability that bikes have to fill in where cars fall short is vast. They take up less space on congested streets. This is happening on a larger scale in Europe. DHL Netherlands parcel delivery replaced 33 trucks with cargo bikes, saving 152 metric tons of carbon dioxide. According to the FHA, an estimated 947,000 hours of vehicle delay annually can be attributed to delivery trucks parked curbside in the downtown area. The further rise of Amazon and internet shopping is only going to make this worse. And more of these services are starting to consider bike delivery, which is where we come in. At Portland Pedal Power, delivery bikes can accommodate approximately 75 lunches on one bike. We can cater a lunch for 300 with 2 bikes. The bikes are parked on the sidewalk, eliminating the traffic and idling emissions caused by delivery vehicles. And we're super sassy. Globally, bikes have long been used to transport goods and services, often out of necessity, as in Cuba, where oil shortages in the 90s prompted the use of bikes and bananas. And Cuban bike culture is still alive and well. So when pushed into a corner where oil is scarce, bikes are logical. So it's worth this to consider when you're preparing for the zombie apocalypse. That was a joke. The US is responsible for 1/4 of global oil consumption. In Portland, 7% of commuters go by bike, only 0.6% nationally, but that still means that 59% are still driving alone. This is from a Minneapolis bike crash report that shows that the more that cycling goes up, the lower the crash rate does. Basically, motorists learn how to drive with bikes the more bikes there are on the road. It isn't just Portland. Cities everywhere are growing. People increasingly want to move to urban spaces, so it's important to think about how we can grow sustainably and attract the kind of diversity and mobility that will make our cities beautiful and less trafficky. So if cities with more cyclists are safer, then it stands to reason that we can make our cities safer by riding more. We can remove common barriers to cycling and move towards more diversity and equity on our city streets. We can slowly reduce our global impact. We can work to have not just complete streets, but collaborative streets. And hopefully cyclists can start to be seen and heard for more than just anger or frustration, but for our sustainable contribution to the economic fabric of the city. It starts with working to change negative perceptions and increase riding diversity. I rode here in heels tonight, actually boots. So my challenge to all of us is ride more, ride safer, and ride in heels if you want to.